Gobdebly Gooker. What more can you say about this character that hasn't been said? Well, I'm going to say a bunch of things anyways, because I chose to talk about this. It's around Thanksgiving time, and I'm running out of things to do topics on. I've got to think of more things. Go back in wrestling history. Maybe next week we'll do something on, I don't know, George Hackensmith. I don't know. I'm sure that'll get views. But the Gobdebly Gooker and Survivor Series 1990. Now, before we get into Survivor Series 1990 and the debut of the Gobdebly Gooker, I'm going to take you back a bit for Vince's brainchild of the Gobdebly Gooker, which was supposed to be a turkey mascot that also wrestled. So you can see it's not exactly the most thought out idea yet. So he calls Dusty Rhodes, old Dusty, and asks for a recommendation for a wrestler. And Dusty recommends Hector Guerrero, son of Gory Guerrero, brother of Eddie Guerrero, uncle of Chavo Guerrero Jr., for Vince to call to come in and play this giant turkey. Now, I know what you're thinking. A Guerrero playing a turkey. That's kind of a waste of talent. It's like putting an Oscar-winning actor in a Marvel movie, which they have done. But Vince did it. So he initially called Hector Guerrero, but Hector Guerrero wasn't interested in taking their calls because he ran to their road agents a few years before, and they were kind of rude to him. But he eventually returned their calls, and Vince was real nice and told him that they wanted him to audition for this part of the Gobdebly Gooker. So we went out to the headquarters, and they put him in full turkey costume, and they put him in the ring, and Hector showed them what he could do. Now, Hector was a lighter guy at this point. He was not one of these big, heavily muscled guys. He was flying Hector Guerrero in WCW before this. And so he did a bunch of flips, he did a bunch of cartwheels, a bunch of higher flying stuff, and so they were impressed. And he got the job. Because what else is a turkey gonna do but fly? Even though I don't know if turkeys can fly. I assume they can. They have wings, and you don't typically eat turkey. You don't typically eat turkey wings. There's no turkey wing restaurants, but maybe there should be turkey wings and barbecue sauce. But anyways, so then they sent Tito Santana down to Mexico, and Hector Guerrero went with him to kind of smooth out the El Matador character and buff Hector Guerrero up a little bit. When he returned, he noticed one thing in the costume, that to see out, there were just these two pinholes, and he had to turn his head to see either way. So when he returned, they got ready for the Gooker's big debut. Now, The Undertaker was also getting ready to make a debut. And he was afraid he was going to debut in the Giant Egg. And that was going to be the death of his career. Well, technically his career did begin with death. It began with the dead man gimmick of The Undertaker. Not in an egg, thank God. So they started showing this egg on TV for weeks leading up to it. And people speculated on what's in the egg. A lot of fans thought Ric Flair was going to come out of the egg. Though I think Ric Flair is old enough. He might be older than that egg. So then, at the end of Survivor Series, Mean Gene stands next to the egg and it hatches, and the Gobdebly Gooker and the turkey comes out, and he talks to Mean Gene only in Gobble, so Mean Gene calls him the Gobdebly Gooker. Now, at this point, you can immediately hear boos. I mean, as soon as he popped out, you can hear boos. As soon as Mean Gene starts talking to him, you can hear boos. So Mean Gene leans into Hector and tells him, "We're going to go in the ring and get this over." As in, they're going to make it work. Now, it's already not working. So maybe best bet is to turn him heel. Turn the bird heel and make him beat up Mean Gene. I mean, that would have been brilliant storytelling. He would have been the biggest heel in the industry. But no, him and Mean Gene go in the ring to a rock rendition of Turkey in the Straw, and they do a square dance. Mind you, this is 1990, and this is in Connecticut. Now, I know we were all taught to square dance in school, but that doesn't mean we all want to watch a turkey and a wrestling announcer square dance on a major pay-per-view. At least most of us don't. Maybe the South does. So then the turkey starts doing flips, and he starts doing cartwheels. And Mean Gene attempts a cartwheel and falls flat on his back, and they really try to sell it. But it gets booed out of the building. So they still wanted to use the Gobdebly Gooker, so they tried it again at a re-debut in Madison Square Garden, where they're going to put a spotlight on him when he was coming to the ring, and he was going to get in the ring and he was going to show his stuff. The problem is they put a spotlight on him, and due to the whites in the eyes, you couldn't see a thing. So they helped him to the ring, and he got in, and he went to do a flip, and he fell flat on his ass. And then the house lights went up. House lights came on, and he did his routine, and then he went to the back. Vince McMahon looked at him exasperated and just walked away. Gorilla Monsoon looked at him and said, "You couldn't see, could you?" And he goes, "No, I couldn't." And Gorilla Monsoon was like, "That's what we thought." And they let Hector Guerrero go. And Hector Guerrero was pretty frustrated at this point. So when they called him again to play the Gobdebly Gooker at Survivor Series 91, he did not return the phone call. But the Gobdebly Gooker did appear at WrestleMania 17 in a gimmick battle royal with a redesigned headpiece so he could see, played by Hector Guerrero. And then he's appeared various times throughout modern WWF, typically as a superstar dressed as him trying to get back at somebody. And so he's been used. But he was before his time. And by before his time, I mean he laid a giant turkey egg in the ring. Hector Guerrero swears it would have worked if they were in more of a kid-friendly town. I think kids can clearly see through bullshit. So that is the Gobdebly Gooker. Join me later in the week for Leonard Part 6, which I thought was definitely not the worst movie I've ever seen. I do not get why it gets the reputation it does. See ya.